Welcome to the Low and Slow podcast.
We're your girls, Crystal and Laken. If you press play today, trust, you made the right decision.
And know whenever you're listening to this, it's exactly the right time.
We invite you to pull up a seat to the conversation, get curious about your current perspective,
and lean in for the opportunity to see yourself in another woman's story.
We created That Girl Magic because we've been where you are.
Here, the talk is real and the breath is steady.
Let's get into your next mindset shift. Welcome back to the Low and Slow podcast. It's your host, Crystal and Laken, and today we're talking about boundaries. We've done a previous episode on this before, but we're talking about them today in a little bit of a different way, probably not in the way that you're used to hearing about them.
Yeah, it's not just just say no and then stand your ground. It's a little bit more nuanced than that.
Yeah. So for a lot of women, this has been some feedback that I've been seeing in a lot of our clients where boundaries sometimes don't feel empowering when setting them. Sometimes they feel unsafe or they're uncomfortable, especially when our emotions are high or maybe when the stakes feel really important, right? Really real. And so what about also when you never practice holding yourself through the discomfort, and that's really why they feel like that. So we're getting into why this happens today and how to move through it.
Yeah, and for a lot of women, especially women that are putting a lot on their plate or maxing out their capacity or they're holding a lot, they are aware of the fact that they need boundaries, right? Like this goes in the category of, I know what I need to do, I just don't know how to do it. And so they know that they're necessary, but when it comes time to actually set them, they tend to go into a freeze response because there's a lot of uncertainty and, like we said, a lot of unsafety in the nervous system when it comes to setting boundaries, or they don't know how because they haven't actually seen an example of it or practiced it before.
Yeah. So today we want to talk about why boundaries sometimes can turn into emotional avoidance and why they feel so hard at first. And then how to start building safety with setting boundaries from internally rather than externally first, right? So before we start taking them to the workplace or before we start, practicing them in relationships, can we start with practicing them with ourselves?
Yeah. And it's really about self-loyalty, not controlling other people, not trying to control outcomes, but not self-abandoning and staying loyal to ourselves and our needs and what's important to us, our non-negotiables. Yeah.
So when I want to name something that might feel a little bit uncomfortable, and a lot of times, we've broken down in a previous episode about boundaries and how, we set boundaries not for the other person, but for ourselves. And sometimes, that can feel like a stiff arm, right? Like this. But I want to name what we sometimes will call setting a boundary as a different lens here. It's actually emotional avoidance, right? Because sometimes we just want to put up the wall immediately and we don't really want to feel what comes with doing that. And so it's those feelings of when you're setting the boundary that we're getting into today.
Yeah. So when you tend to shut down or pull away, or if you have a habit of ghosting people or over intellectualizing, going into that rumination or that spiral, instead of being able to stay present with what you're feeling and being able to effectively communicate what's happening for you, a lot of times we'll call that a boundary because we're saying, oh, I'm not going to engage anymore. So this is my boundary, but it's not a healthy boundary because, again, we're avoiding not only what we're feeling, but we're avoiding communicating it in a way that makes other people understand the way that they should engage with us, which is what a healthy boundary does.
Yeah. So sometimes this can, she gave you a couple of examples like pulling away, shutting down, maybe sending the perfectly worded text, right? Honestly, the main thing to point out here is using whatever it is, whatever method, to escape the feeling instead of hold it, because it's easier to escape it, right? Holding it sometimes doesn't feel so good. And this is also something that it's a learned behavior that we've learned to do that. So us providing you the distinction is super important. Go ahead.
Yeah. boundaries that are made in a healthy way, a good way to check yourself is like they don't remove emotion from the situation. They require emotional capacity. They require you to be able to hold that emotion. And like I said, be able to communicate it to the other person or the party involved. So if you find yourself not allowing yourself to have the emotion or using a quote unquote boundary to not feel something or to avoid feeling something that's uncomfortable for you, that's a good way to understand that, well, maybe I'm not really setting a boundary. Maybe I'm just avoiding something that I don't want to feel.
Yeah. And, in the moment, that's valid, right? Like, I think we've all experienced that before. But then you have to be honest with yourself as like, is that really helping me? Right? Because if the boundary is being set to avoid the discomfort, it's not going to feel grounding. It's not going to feel like I can move forward from that. It's going to feel like kind of raw, right? Like maybe shaky, maybe a little bit guilt ridden. Like, did I handle that right? And, if we do that enough times and we don't keep liking how that feels, then, it's like, why do we keep doing this to ourselves? It's also not helping us in any way.
Yeah, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because as we go about that route of quote unquote setting boundaries, even though that's not what that actually is, when we become emotionally avoidant, put up those walls and call it a boundary, it doesn't feel good because we're collecting the evidence against ourselves, right? We're collecting this evidence that says, see, I'm bad at boundaries, or boundaries don't work, or they don't get me the outcome that I want, when really my nervous system just hasn't learned how to safely hold that yet for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to, talk or bring in something important here because there's like people see all the time like advice about boundaries online. And again, like boundaries are, yes, we set them to protect ourselves, but sometimes in protecting yourself, you're actually protecting yourself from what you're feeling as well. And so that's when this like avoidant behavior comes up. So we really want to talk about when setting the boundary, how can we start to create that safety internally so that when we are doing it other places, we've built that from somewhere. We've already given ourselves some evidence. And this is not something we're handling straight out the gate, like in the workplace or in a relationship, and then feels like attack on our nervous system.
Yeah, and it doesn't make someone avoidant as a person if they use this tactic. I know we get very caught up in, attachment styles of like anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, secure attachment. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're an avoidant person or that you have an avoidant attachment style. That can be the case, but these two are not to be conflated. So it just means that avoidance can show up in a really subtle, socially acceptable way most of the time because our culture is slightly avoidant, especially now where everybody's safe behind screens, right? But that doesn't have to mean, like we say all the time, it doesn't have to mean anything about you.
Yeah. So what are those subtle ways that emotional avoidance can show up? Because, what actually is emotional avoidance? It's rarely dramatic. It's sometimes very subtle, like canceling plans instead of just communicating like, hey, I'm overwhelmed and I do really want to go to this, but I don't have the capacity for it right now, right? Letting people know where you're at, or maybe pulling back, from a partner or from a friendship or from, your work, to-do list, right? And instead of maybe asking for reassurance or clarity or help or support, right? And it feels justified, but it's actually the thing that's like unplugging you from yourself, right? Because I'm avoiding the feelings that come in I'm avoiding the feelings that come with leaning into the discomfort.
Yeah, and this can show up also as keeping relationships at surface level, like even long-term ones, because that emotional exposure or letting someone in feels really unsafe. And it's not because you don't care, not because you don't want that level of connection, but your body hasn't learned that that depth, that next layer down, is something that is okay, or that is, for lack of a better word, safe. I know we use that a lot, but you're not comfortable with it yet. Think about like how comfort zones work, right? We have this area where it's like, okay, I feel really safe in this zone. And then outside of that is this unknown. And until we get to the edge of where it feels okay, right? Like it's going to feel just unsafe. And then we have to push a little bit to find the new edge. That's the boundary. The boundary doesn't live inside the comfort zone. It's right outside the comfort zone, but before it feels unsafe. And that's where we find these new edges. That's how we evolve. That's how we grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when setting, and that's why we want to bring up the emotional avoidance, because right there when you're at that edge where this is where it hits a lot of women. And this is where they will avoid conflict just to keep the peace, or like, I don't want to create waves, or, we talked about in the last episode, I think it was last episode or a couple episodes ago, where recognizing the patterns, right? Because when it's a pattern, this isn't something you're consciously choosing. Like this is something that you've learned over time. And so when it's a pattern, it's not a conscious choice. It's not the peace you're looking for. It's not something that is, essentially getting you in the direction you're wanting to go. And it's really another form of like self-abandonment here. So, like these questions we've asked you guys before of like, what is it costing you to keep keeping the peace that's not yours, right? It's costing you your peace. It's costing you how you could feel about it if you did something different.
Yeah, and self-abandonment can feel good in a way, right? Like it gives you this sense of independence, and that can become a really lovely shield is how it feels. And I know this very well, but that feeling of, I don't need anybody, I've got this, not having to rely on anyone, when really that distance is keeping you from being fully seen or being able to feel like you can receive support in a way that allows for a level of connection that you most likely desire. And so that's where it turns into self-sabotage.
Yeah. Yeah. So like the key thing here, right, is real boundaries are going to support both your needs and your connection to yourself. Think about plugging back into you, asking yourself, what is it in this moment I need right now? I think it's very sometimes challenging to, maybe we, like Laken said, we haven't seen how boundaries were set around us in maybe a healthy way. Or maybe we've seen boundaries set, but then they're being set out of emotional avoidance, and they're not actually giving themselves what they need. So avoidance is only protecting you from the discomfort and not so much from being hurt. Like it still hurts, but in a different way. So I think this is the key thing here, is if it's one or the other, then it's like, oh, okay, this is something for me to go back through and revisit, because I want to marry those two. And that's where the real boundary can come in of like, is this a boundary that works for me, or is this one I'm just used to setting out of emotional avoidance?
And a lot of women were conditioned to believe that emotions are inconvenient, or that conflict is dangerous, or that it's to be avoided at all costs. Like those are very, very common feelings amongst many, many women.
So when they set the boundary and someone reacts poorly, right, their system goes straight into threat mode, right? Because like you said, like it's inconvenient to feel the emotions. And if I feel the emotions and I let someone see me like this, then, what will they possibly do with that?
And that's where that risk comes in, or like the perceived consequences. So we start spirals that sound like, I did something wrong, or I should have said that differently, or I shouldn't have said anything at all, right? And that goes left.
Yeah. And here's something that in that moment, like if you're listening and you hear, dang, I've said that before, or like, oh, I'm feeling really seen right now. Here's the reframe that honestly changes everything. Boundaries are really not meant to control the outcomes. Again, Laken has explained that you explained it very clearly in the previous episode that like when you set the boundary, it is not for the other person. It's for you. It's for the other person to know how to interact with you. And if I am setting the boundary to control the outcome from the other person, that's not for me, right? Mm-hmm. I need to be able to, like, I shouldn't be attached to what the outcome is. I'm setting this personally for me. And if someone does react about it poorly or whatever, right? The boundary is meant to give you some clarity about what you need in the moment. And I think when you can release setting it for the reaction you're seeking from the other person, like ask yourself, what reaction am I seeking from me? Like even if you don't know, because you haven't done it yet, it's like just giving yourself some questions to answer first before like letting the other person decide for you what that boundary meant.
Yeah. So basically, at the end of the day, boundaries are not meant to control an outcome. They are meant to clarify the relationship with yourself and what your needs are.
Yeah. So can we adjust what we're using to measure, um, did it go well, right? Like, can we ask ourselves, did I stay with myself through this? Did I, even though I was feeling uncomfortable, did I, still say what I needed to say and express what I needed to express? Because if we're focusing on like, did this go well? Like, do they think they received it well? Like, that's where we'll easily go against ourselves rather than when we bring it back to us, like, did I stay with myself? That's where we can start to build trust there because we're the ones giving ourselves the evidence. So this is where honestly, most people skip this part, because in high stake conversations, relationships, whatever, when things are on the line, this is where we're not building boundary strength there. That's not where we're starting. We're starting with ourselves first.
Yeah, it feels like you said too risky. It feels unsafe, and that again falls outside of that boundary with yourself, right? Just outside of my comfort zone is where I want to stay, and the best place to build that is internally, where you hold the consequences for yourself, right? And also it's where we keep promises to ourselves. So internally is where it's a little quieter, a little safer, and it's where we can get some positive momentum.
Yeah. You're not like choosing to attack yourself in the moment after something feels awkward. Like when it's with another person, I think it's very easy to do that. But if you can start to do it with yourself, this is where it's like, oh, that felt different, right? You're gathering information.
Yeah, and in conversations with other people, like often if the conversation goes left, we'll replay that conversation over in our head a million times. Mm-hmm. And not to say that we don't ruminate about self-thought, but it's not as prevalent as when we have perceived consequences from other people outside of us.
Yeah, and this also looks like, pausing before responding instead of reacting immediately. Like the whole thing of when you're interacting with others, it's like, do people listen to respond or are they just listening to like hear what you have to say, right? And if we can take the other person out of it for a second, am I taking a pause to allow my nervous system and what's going on in my mind to align or have an area where I could say like, oh, that felt different rather than immediately reacting out of the pattern or out of defense or out of like, it's easier to feel like that with someone else. But when it's with yourself, you haven't slowed down enough to like see what your nervous system's saying.
Yeah, and removing the other party allows you to make these more emotional reps with self, right? It removes the performance aspect. I don't have to be worried about the expectations or the perception of other people in this moment. These are reps that are with me and myself so that I can get in right relation in order to be able to expand that out to these external inputs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before you can hold a boundary with someone else, can you stay with yourself even when the discomfort shows up, even maybe when you feel awkward, even when you're like, I'm embarrassed. I don't know. I'm trying to think of some other emotions that, even when you're sad or you're frustrated, or maybe when it's a familiar feeling that you have felt before. And this is where you can really lean in because you know this feeling well. And you've chosen, like, this is you choosing to handle it differently. So like staying with yourself and also acknowledging of like, oh, I was feeling this. I'm noting and naming what I'm feeling and I'm still choosing to stay here with myself, so that I can do something different.
And also if we can't keep promises to ourselves, then we're setting the bar for how other people are going to interact with us, right? So if I tell myself that I'm going to show up for myself in a certain way, and then I don't do it, I don't keep a promise to myself, not only am I introducing a lot of opportunity for self-doubt to show up because I'm not trusting myself essentially, or I'm breaking that trust with myself, but also it doesn't allow me to stay regulated. And if I am trying to set boundaries from a place of dysregulation, either with myself or definitely with other people, it's not going to work out in my favor. And again, I'm going to keep collecting that evidence that says that, oh, I don't know how to do this, or boundaries don't work for me.
Right. Yeah. So it's the key part there is like the dysregulation, right? You have to regulate first and then communicate second. And boundaries aren't meant to be set in fight or flight because it's animalistic of like in the moment. No, you're not going to handle something as if You had the time to like process and see exactly what you need and then handle it differently. You're just going to go like a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah. And that's where that practice with the self comes in so clutch, because if I can teach myself when the stakes are low how to stay regulated in a place and set boundaries with myself, then I can, extrapolate out from there. But I can do it and effectively communicate it after I'm regulated and not trying to push outside of where I'm comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. So the order matters, right? Like you don't just go way out into like, you're not just jumping all around like, okay, I'm here now and now I'm back here and I should know how to respond here. It's like, no, let's notice first what's coming up. Let's take a pause, right? Let's see what's coming up, the emotions. Let's regulate ourselves first, stay with ourselves through what we're feeling and then respond. We're not going from immediately, like you've been probably just responding immediately. And what has that been looking like? Avoiding, like, right? Doing something else to distract you. And so it's really like slowing down enough. And this is where like that comes in a lot of times where people are like slowing down to speed up. It's like we got to slow down enough because our mind is usually going a mile a minute and our nervous system they're not in the same place. So like we have to allow our nervous system to catch up, or not even catch up to the mind, but have a place where it's being also considered as well, so that they can start to work together.
Yeah. And being regulated does not mean putting a mask on. I think that happens a lot where, people will say, oh, I need to calm down or I need to, take myself out of this situation. And down regulation doesn't look like, oh, I'm just going to push through and fake it till I make it, or I'm going to put a mask on that says that everything's okay. That's still avoiding the emotion there.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting curious with yourself. It is asking, what do I need in this moment? It is controlling the breath, right? Like getting to a place where I can calmly respond and I'm not reactive. And it means staying present long enough for active choice to be able to come online. And when I say active choice, meaning I'm not reacting from a state of fear, right? I'm not saying, oh, I have to do this right now because there's a fear of a consequence if I don't. It's I'm choosing this for me because this is what is needed in this moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is where it gets real, right? I think, just slowing down, coming back to the breath, if that's something you've never done before, it's like, at first it feels like, oh, like God, like this is what I have to do to, but the more that you do it, you start to become more comfortable with it because it's uncomfortable feeling these feelings, not knowing what to do with them. And then that's where all this stored energy just gets stored in our body. But we have to be able to move through that and, know that when we start to practice this enough, you start to shift that inner belief that for most women, they feel like no matter what they do, like it's not going to be in their favor, right? When it comes to boundaries, like someone, they'll always respond this way or whatever. And the more that we keep telling ourselves that and then keep avoiding what comes with the work of doing that, we're essentially going in the direction that we don't want to be going because we're missing that key piece of like staying with what feels uncomfortable with us first before we make it about someone else.
Yeah. And that's what makes boundaries feel pointless or like, that the boundary failed or that it's not gonna get me the outcome that I'm looking for, or people don't respond to it. And most women actually don't struggle with boundaries themselves, right? They struggle with being able to stay emotionally present with themselves.
Okay.
And that's why it feels like boundaries are not accessible to them.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, stop asking, will this go well if I talk to someone about this, or stop focusing on the outcome. Can I start to be clear on what it is with myself that I need right now in this moment, what it is with myself that I'm feeling right now in this moment. And sometimes just even slowing down enough to identify those things. I've had a client last week tell me this, like we did this as an activity for her homework, and some of the things that she came up with, the things that she needed right now in that moment was like a walk. She did that. She needed a hug at one point. And when she told me that, she broke down, right? These are things that you can tangibly give yourself. These are things that she started to put into practice with like her dad and her husband and, even her daughter. And so she started to see when I don't override what I need in that moment, and I'm more clear with myself, then I can start seeing like my next best action of like what I can do to help myself through this.
Yeah. And it might just be staying curious of asking, like, am I asking myself to do something that my nervous system hasn't practiced yet, or that I don't feel comfortable with yet? And the keyword there again, yet,
Yeah.
right? So can I practice it? Can I be intentional about it? Can I have the awareness to notice when that's coming up and choose something differently?
Yeah. So the boundaries aren't about avoiding those emotions. They're about being regulated enough to stay honest, stay curious, stay with yourself through the emotion, and to not shame yourself for whatever you're feeling when that comes up. That's something that starts internally for you to do. And the more that you start to practice this, the more you're building that regulation with yourself.
Yeah. So stay regulated, take a breath, choose one small rep at a time, and trust that your self-loyalty will build over time the more you stay honest with yourself.
Yeah. And build it with yourself first before taking it somewhere where it's like, damn, I've never done this before. So, if this episode was helpful to you in any kind of way, please be sure to rate it, give us 5 stars, let us know something that stuck out to you, maybe share it with a friend. We do still have where you can request a remix. So if you have a specific scenario, maybe in the workplace or maybe in relationships, or maybe even in like family dynamics, right? That's especially after the holidays, a lot of that was coming up. Send it to us. We'd love to break it down on a future episode. And anything else, Lake? I think we'll see you in the next episode.
Yep. See you guys next time. When was the last time you felt truly clear and at peace?
Maybe you've been asking yourself, why can't I just feel peace?
Most of us don't just need another escape. Vacation is great and all, but what we really need is integration.
When's the last time you gave yourself permission to play? As adults, we don't do that enough. And this is to be messy, curious, maybe even a little wild, like the little girl you used to be. She's still here. She's just waiting for you to say it's safe to come out again.
That's why we created Peace, Play, Love. For 7 days in the Costa Rican jungle, luxury meets real life with story work, somatic practices, and nervous system tools that help you not just reset here, but take that peace home with you.
I've been bringing women to Costa Rica for years because this land and the people have been a part of my own healing journey. And all of us have left transformed for the better.
At Peace, Play, Love, we'll slow down together, we'll breathe, we'll meet the guilt, the shame, the exhaustion, and learn how to alchemize them into permission, into softness, into peace that you can actually feel in your body.
This retreat is deeper than a pause. We're not just unplugging you, we are rewiring you.
I've witnessed these women, laugh from the depths of their souls, feel reconnected to who they truly are, tear up from actually taking in a sunset, and watching as their shame, their stress, and fears all float off into the great beyond.
You'll map your next season with clarity and leave with insight to keep your nervous system regulated and your choices aligned long after you return. We keep it small on purpose, just 9 women, each supported through high-touch coaching, sisterhood, and real community.
The women who come, they're do-it-allers. They show up no matter what. They climb the mountain with the weight of the world on their back and a smile on their face, because that's just what they do. But they're looking at this next chapter of their life, and they know that they don't want it to feel like the last 5 did.
You don't have to hold it all anymore. You don't have to keep proving you're okay. This retreat is your safe place to land, and it's your invitation to play again.
There's something magical in this land that helps you find the magic in you. The light turns on, the weight lightens, and from there, you decide what the next chapter will be and who you will be inside of that on your terms. This is the magic of saying yes to you.
If you're craving calm and clarity that sticks, this is your invitation to join us in Costa Rica in June. Come exhale with us and remember who you are beneath the noise.